What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the North Leeds Jitz podcast. I think episode 152, maybe episode 53, who knows? But this week we've got Professor Mike on the podcast, and we've got the awesome Daniel Goodfellow, Olympian, joined us to talk about his journey in sport and eventually jiu-jitsu today. So thanks very much for being here, man.
Yeah, no worries. It's a pleasure to be here.
Just saying, it's the first interview podcast I think we've done for some time. Like, I'm trying to think back when the last one we did. Did we do one last year?
Well, I did one last summer with Marco Sestima and a few league people, but that was about it.
Yeah, not in this place though, right? We used to do it quite often, didn't we? We probably should get, like, Daniel obviously is one of our students here as well now, so we probably should kind of trawl through the student list again and pick out some people that we want to talk to, because it is good for members to hear other people's stories.
100% agree. I was just thinking the same thing this morning, really. Should we dive straight into this? Yeah.
You're working on that all night.
Honestly, the amount I've heard in my time, it's crazy. Yeah, let's go.
That's why we don't do these very often.
Which are really bad puns. So, what was your first sporting experience?
But it's my first sporting experience really was football. I grew up playing a lot of sport, and that was down to, you know, it was really my mum, to be honest with you. But I just love sport in general. Football is I feel like most young boys, you know, first thing that they think, oh my god, like I want to be a professional football player, because it's a great sport. It's, you know, again, it's something that you feel a part of in that community. So my first sporting experiences were playing football, and then slowly I just started to kind of, as the years went by, do different sports, try out different things, and never in a million years did I think that I'd be doing Olympic diving. And when I was younger, I didn't know it was a thing. It's not like people are like, oh, did you grow up wanting to dream of becoming an Olympic diver? I was like, no, I don't think anyone is, you know, when they're younger thinks that's what I want to do, because a lot of people don't even know it's a sport. And Olympic sport, sometimes when it's not the main sports like F1, golf, football, when it's not them, a lot of people don't even consider it at a really young age. Yeah. And it's just something that I fell into.
Where is home?
I was born in a small village on the outskirts of Cambridge, and it's again somewhere that's not common for a diver to come from, because the facilities there are terrible. Right. Absolutely terrible. And I went to my first Olympics doing the 10-metre platform, which in Cambridge we didn't have a 10-metre platform. So I spent most of my life not diving on the board that eventually I would go on to the Olympics and win a medal at.
So that's quite strange, because I remember reading a book called You Are Awesome by Matthew Syed, the table tennis champion. And he said that I think there was 4 of the best table tennis players in Europe all came from within 3 streets of each other.
Really?
Because they were the only people who had table tennis tables, right? Like, someone had one in their garage, they all played it, no one else did it, and they were the best. Like, that's just the way it worked. So it's interesting that actually you didn't even have access to the facilities to even enable you to become a diver. Yeah,
the facilities were awful. I mean, I went for the reason why I went to dive at, it was called Parkside Pool in Cambridge. It's just like a local pool, really. Some people have swimming lessons. There's a swim club there, but I mean, I went there for swimming lessons because I couldn't get swimming lessons at my local pool. And then when I got there, my mum saw it after, and she was like, "That looks quite interesting," and I was like, "Looks all right." Turned up for my first session with my goggles on, and you turn up for your first session and diving with goggles on. That's like my coach is like, "What are you doing?"
Oh, really?
Yeah, because it's like, obviously when you dive in and all the pressure comes on, it's like you can like pop your eyes out. So it's like, get rid of them. Turned up wearing, I don't know what I was wearing. Like, usually we wear Speedos, but I was turning up, I think I was wearing some like beach shorts or something like that. And he's like, right, get rid of them goggles, get rid of them shorts. And then after my first session, I was a bit like, oh, I don't know, like this is all right, but I don't know if it's for me, but carried on doing it. But the only reason I was there was because I wanted to go for swimming lessons, because I couldn't get them at my local pool. So the facilities were just, you know, standard. I didn't even know of any other pools in the area that had 10-metre facilities. But it's interesting you said that about the table tennis like situation there, because a lot of the people that I was on the Olympic team with didn't come from pools where there was great facilities.
Wow.
A lot of the best divers that kind of made it to the Olympics and then won a medal, they started out at facilities that weren't actually that good. And a lot of the clubs that had the big facilities didn't necessarily have as many Olympians being produced. So I think for me, it was just, looking back on it now, it's like, as long as there's something there, it doesn't have to be, you know, a great kind of set of facilities for you to thrive and like do well, if you know what I mean. So it's, that was interesting about what the turnout for the actual team ended up to be like. There was a lot of people there who didn't come from, you know, great, I guess, facility background.
I mean, obvious question. I mean, I don't want to jump ahead because I want to ask you how old you were when you started. We'll do that. But I have to ask at that point, what was it then about those people who made it to the top that made them different to the others who didn't have the facilities? There must have been, or is there, should I say, a collection of traits or abilities physically, mentally, whatever, that enables people to rise to the top in that?
Yeah, I think the people that I'm thinking of were just very, very driven, competitive. Like, again, they come in every day and they work really hard. But it became clear the further I got on in my career, it wasn't about, I guess, what you had, you know, what situation you were in. It was more about your attitude towards it. And again, the people that ended up kind of making it to a certain level, and I guess what we would class as successful, they were dealt some really bad cards and like had a lot of problems on the way. But they were just individuals that came in that had good coaching was a main thing as well. Because even though these facilities weren't good, because the coaching was good, you know, eventually they had a good foundation that they could carry forward basically. So it's one thing that stuck out. Even though I kind of was at this small pool in Cambridge where I grew up, it didn't really have a negative impact at all, considering the facilities weren't very good. And it was just down to, I think, the individuals and the coaching and the people around them, basically.
Good coaching in terms of the ability to create the environment for people to enjoy coming back, or good coaching in a technical sense, or both?
It was a bit of both, really, because it's hard when you're at a young age doing a sport that, because this coach is trying to make you an Olympic athlete. They're trying to make you the best. So they can't make the session so fun that you come in every time and it's like, oh yeah, how was it? It's like, oh yeah, I come in every session and I love it because we get to play games and we get to do this. Like, it was basically a fine line between being hard on you, being tough on you, making the sessions like, because at the end of the day, if you're going to be the best, you're not going to enjoy every session because you have to do stuff that you don't want to do. And like, so the coach that I had when I was younger were good at finding that balance of like just not making it miserable, because you're not going to want to come back to somewhere that's like, you go, you know, every day you come in and it's miserable, because, you know, there's been times and periods of training where I've come in and I've been like, this is brutal, this is tough, and it doesn't make you want to carry on. So I think when I was younger, it was trying to find that line between not pushing a kid too much that they don't want to do anymore, but also you can't just be like, if a kid comes in and like, oh, I don't want to do that, or like, oh, I don't feel up to it today, that's not going to make you better.
I'm just thinking about the recent changes you've made to the comp team in the advanced schedule with the kids and bringing in this testing, but in a way to, I suppose, well, you might be better articulated, but in my mind, in a way to filter out the kids that really want to push themselves. And I suppose that was a consideration for you, T, was it, around, you know, we've got and the reason I asked the question, we've got coaches who give kids amazing experiences and fun every single time. Mm-hmm. But if you want to go and compete and win, there needs to be a level and there needs to be some challenges. Was that something you were thinking about?
Yeah, I think what I was thinking when you were talking just then was, it reminded me first initially on the parallels between what we do on the normal classes, which is we're trying to make it as fun as possible, but at the same time we do need to make it difficult in some ways, not because we're trying to make them into like Olympic or world champion type jiu-jitsu players, but because there's a certain integrity that comes with doing jiu-jitsu where you can't instill in them a false sense of belief that they are able to defend themselves if really we've just given them like a watered down thing because it was way more fun to do. So there's that side of it. And then I think because the belt system for kids is largely based on attendance rather than skill development, some of them can develop a false belief in how like much they know or how good they are, especially if they're not sparring very regularly. And so the advanced class trials and comp team trials are very much based not around your belt level, but what can you actually do. So it's another way they can get tested, but it's a lot more on practical skills rather than, and values and stuff for the comp team. But yeah, it's another way of getting tested.
And it will have been challenging for some of the children who perhaps didn't meet the criteria right now for that. And I'm sure you came in last week and spoke to the kids. Were there times in your journey, Dan, then, that you hit hurdles like that when perhaps you didn't make the grade? And what went through your head? And then what advice would you give for a child, and as importantly, a parent then, who perhaps has been for that trial for the comp, didn't get through? What should they be doing next?
Yeah, I think there's two parts to it actually. To I guess my response to that is, the first part is I was still dealing with setbacks like that last year, and you know, to like the thing is, it never stops. Like, there will always be, throughout, you know, when you do anything, it's not like it gets to a point where you stop going through hard times. Like, for example, like towards my end of the career, it was still a fight for me to get selected for competitions. So people can come up to you and, you know, you can be doing the sport for however long, it doesn't matter how proven you are, you might not make the cut for the World Championships this year. And that's happened to me before, where even when I'm, you know, 27, 28, people are saying, oh, sorry, you didn't get selected for that, you didn't make the cut for that. So it almost never ends, but in my opinion, it's the people that always bounce back from that are the people that are different. When I was younger, it's funny you say, like, the belt systems now, like how you say it, it's the difference between the attendance and I guess what they can actually do, is that a lot of the kids that when I was growing up with, they had this kind of like sometimes a false sense of how good they were as a diver, and like there were times where I didn't get selected for stuff. All the junior programs when I was younger, I had the people at the top basically say, this kid's never going to make it, they're never going to be good. And you had other kids that were like, they almost had this false sense of like, oh yeah, like I'm maybe a bit better than I think. It was the kids that were always told, you know, you're not cut out for this program, oh, you just missed out on this program, like, oh, we don't think he has a future. They are usually the kids that ended up being great and making it to that Olympic level. So I think it's not that if you don't get selected for a program or you just miss out on something, it's like that's it. Because I spent years, and even, you know, I spent 20 years of that. But it's the moments where you kind of, you have that, okay, well, it wasn't good enough. What do I need to work on? Work on it, come back, and then you just keep on repeating that process. And there's always times where, and it basically never stops. It never stops. You always have to deal with setbacks. So there were so many times when I was younger and I didn't make programs, didn't make cuts. People said I wasn't going to make it, and that's just completely normal. And having that kind of sense of reality of like, this is where I'm at, rather than getting lulled into a sense of, oh, I think I should be this belt, or I think I should be going here and here. I think having that sense of entitlement, especially from a young age, is really dangerous, because it lulls you into that sense of maybe thinking you're better than you are, if you get me?
Yeah, no, totally, mate. I'm just thinking about my own son and going through the football academy process now, right? Like, he's under 15s, he's captaining an academy side. But the likelihood is at some point, maybe even next year, he might be told, sorry, you've not made the cut. When you hear about these footballers, and probably football is one of the harshest or the most challenging environments to excel in. But you hear about these people who just keep going, like Jamie Vardy and, you know, all that. They just keep going and they find a way through. What was it then inside you? Was it you, or was it your parents, or was it a coach? Where did that drive come from, and that relentlessness to never give in?
I think it's something that it wasn't like a feeling in myself. It was learned over time, and a lot of it came from my mum as well. Because when I was younger, like, it's interesting you talk about like the whole parent dynamic as well between the kid and like. I'd always go into sessions as a kid, and if I came out of that session and I like maybe wasn't as committed, or like say I misbehaved in a session and my coach wasn't happy, a lot of the kids' parents around me would then be defensive of the kid, and when that happens, like my mum was never like that. If I came out of a session and I refused to do something, or I was messing around, or I wasn't committed, my mum was always just basically just like, what's the point? Like, she was always defensive of the coach, and I was like, Mum, come on, help me out here. Like, you know what I mean? Coach is having a go at me, but she was always just kind of, in defense of like the coach, and she basically said it's down to me. Like, if you don't want to be here, you don't have to be here. Like, it's your choice to be here. You want to be better. You want to, go and do amazing things. You want to go to the Olympics and stuff like that. So it came from my mum at first, and over time it just became a discipline thing. Whereas, like, for example, if I had a setback now in my career, it wasn't a case of me just being like, right, now I've got to bounce back. It wasn't an option. It was almost ingrained in me from just from years and years and years of. And that comes from when I started diving at about 8 years old. Because for me, the discipline is like what you can do when you don't have motivation. Because for me, anyone can come in when they have motivation and do well. Like, anyone can do that. Like, that doesn't really impress me, but it's the people when stuff's going really badly, you're going for a really tough back, those people that can turn up and it's almost doesn't even feel like they need that motivation to do that, they're the people that in my mind will make it. So yeah, every time I had a setback, it was kind of just ingrained in me that it's having the discipline to do what you need to do, not when you have motivation, because you're never ever going to go through life where you have motivation all the time.
There's been a few points where it's been really reminding me of one of the kids comp team values that we talk about a lot is grit, which is like coined from Angela Duckworth, who's this psychologist. Talks about one of the traits of successful people, especially in sporting or like military areas, is this grit, which he says it's like long-term perseverance to your goals. So even it is when you get in your setbacks and things like that, it's not necessarily the people who on paper you would think would be successful, those kids who are, this guy is like a bit above everyone else, they've got the best facilities, all that kind of stuff. It's the ones who will just keep going and no matter what. And so, something around that is, I tell the kids is, it's not really how big your goals are, but it's also what you're willing to sacrifice to get there. Because it's all well and good saying, let's say for jiu-jitsu, I want to go to the World Championships, but what are the things you're going to have to give up? Because it's for something that big, it's going to be like a lot of your social life. It's going to be, you're not going to, if you're in high school, you're probably not going to be going to your friends' houses. You're going to not be able to do much of the sports. It's maybe you don't get into as many relationships and things like that. So what are the kind of sacrifices you had to make growing up through diving?
Yeah, growing up through diving, I mean, I obviously started, it's one of those sports where you had to start at a young age. It's not like you can kind of take up, say like, I don't know, I know some sports you can take up later in life, but because I started it so young, I went through primary school, secondary school, and then it's tough when you finish school and say it's like in the summer and it's like the weather's beautiful, all your mates are like, oh, do you want to go down the park, play football, or we're going here at the weekend, like, or we're going on holiday. It's like every single time I used to go home from school, it used to be, right, now I've got to go train for like, 2-3 hours or whatever it is. And you miss out on basically time with your friends. And then obviously I moved away at a really young age. I moved away from home when I was 15, basically to the performance director of British Diving said to me, we've got this, this opportunity where we can move you to a pool that has a 10 metre and good facilities. And at 15, my mum was basically like, you've got, if you want to make it, you've got to take it. And I was like, yeah, well, and to me it just seemed like a no-brainer where it's one of these opportunities that when it comes, you have to take it. So I moved away from home when I was 15 and moved away from all my friends, family, and I moved down to Plymouth and basically tried to make my diving career work because that was one of the best high performance centres at the time. I sacrificed, I guess, all the time with my friends, my family, but it's not really a sacrifice though in the end because I ended up having a lot of opportunities to make new friends where I was at. So it's not like you have to sacrifice everything. Sometimes the sacrifice then leads to something that's actually better. So I did have to sacrifice a lot of time with friends and family, but it gave me a new opportunity and a new door to make new friends and new connections with people and relationships with people that I'm going to have for the rest of my life now as well. So
probably deeper connections as well.
Yeah, it's hard to describe like the kind of connection you have when you're a group of people performing at a certain level, all working towards a common goal. It's something special that you kind of can't describe, and it's addictive. It's addictive, and that's why, you know, athletes, when it's their time to retire, which I've recently done, it's, even though your body and your mind might not be able to do what you did before, people still want to stay involved in it, because that feeling of just being part of that group of people that just are working towards that one goal together in that high performance environment, it's something, it gives you like a rush and a feeling that's just so addictive and you can't get enough of, basically.
Yeah, we were talking earlier, weren't we, about Kev Sinfield and the fact that Kev signed back on with England coaching right through to the World Cup in 2027, and that was his rationale for that. That he just felt he couldn't, at this point in his life, walk away from that high performance environment. It's very similar, I think, to the military, particularly when you go to war and you've got this collective unit that have trained hard, that suffer together. And again, it goes back to jiu-jitsu and that kind of, that adversity and that suffering, that collective effort, as Plato said, life is a collective effort. I think that's what we offer here, don't we? We offer a chance for the normal guy in the street to come into an environment like that. Not necessarily at Olympic level or World Championship level, but an environment where you can struggle alongside someone else. And that is the thing that builds those bonds, right?
The thing is, it's interesting to say it, because there's a lot of people that, because I thought diving is a sport that you do because you want to be good. And when I was diving, there's a lot of people that used to do diving alongside of like the high performance scores. They used to do it like recreationally. And I used to think like diving, like doing it I love diving, but the thought of me turning up and doing just like a diving, like recreationally and having no end goal, to me was like crazy at the time. And then as I got older, I realised these people aren't coming in for the diving. They're not coming in to do the sport. Like, they're not probably jumping off the boards thinking, oh, I'm having such a great, I mean, they might do, they might love it, but it was more the fact that they were coming in and they got to have that community, and they were basically coming in to have a break from, you know, school. Some of them were doing like medicine degrees, but they were coming in doing diving as like recreational training. And it's like, they're not coming in necessarily for the diving, they're coming in to have that community, the friendships with people that they have, and just to be part of that environment that is obviously just people enjoy, and it's also addictive. Yeah,
that's 99.9% of our community, isn't it? You know, there'll be maybe one or two who have aspirations to compete at the very, very highest level in here, and they can go on and do that. But most people are here for that connections with the people and that shared struggle, I'd suggest.
So tell me what it was like when you moved to this performance centre at 15, walking in for the first time.
Yeah, well, it's weird. Diving is such a small community. I don't know if it's like jiu-jitsu, to be fair. I'm not sure, but like everyone knows everyone at like a decent level. The people that I'm competing with now, and the people that are the kind of like the coaches and the people that I've known them since I was a kid. So it's good because I knew people there, and it was actually weird because my coach ended up moving with me, because I was kind of like his like diver that he kind of molded and made so, and he knew that I had a good chance of going to the Olympics, and for him as well, he was like, I want to carry on that journey with you. So he ended up moving with me down there to this kind of like 10-meter facility in Plymouth. But it was just a whole different kind of ball game, really. I was training twice a day instead of once a day, because obviously when I was, you know, before the age of 15, I was at school. I had to go to school and then go training afterwards. When I went down to Plymouth when I was about 15, it was I'm now training twice a day, and my priority shifted from basically school and any work outside to diving. That's when diving became my job, essentially. And that's also when I started to get funded to do it as well. So it didn't lose its like the kind of aspect of fun, but when I transitioned from being just Dan, the kid who went to school and did some diving on the side, to that transition to basically now it's my job, this is what I focus on and I'm doing. It's weird because it did become more professional. I became more dedicated to it, but it also did kind of lose its fun a tiny bit, because then and now it wasn't just something that I did on the side, it was like a job. And to have that at the age of like 15 is really strange. I was saying that obviously I've retired now and I did it for 20 years, but it's weird retiring from something that you did for 20 years at 28. So it's like, yeah, people are like, oh, you're still so young. It's like, yeah, but I don't feel that way. So it's weird. Like when I first went down there, it was like, it was overwhelming, but at the same time, it's because I started at such a young age, everything was just kind of feels like my life has been shifted, and I had to grow up, you know, quite quickly.
And what makes a good diver?
Honestly, I don't know. I don't.
Six pack.
Yeah, yeah. You have to pull up a good pair of speedos. Maybe that's had an impact on the judges. But to be honest, like a good diver from a young age, I couldn't tell you. Again, because I was saying how a lot of the kids that when I was growing up, who I thought were going to be superstars, turned out not to be. And the kids that kept on going and kept on plodding along, and kind of came out of the woodwork, and didn't have any specific attributes that were unbelievable. But in diving, it helps to have a lot of core strength. Because obviously you basically have to be complete control of your body, and in the springboard diving you're working like against the boards, and it's a lot of leg strength, and you don't want to have like a lot of upper body strength at all when you're diving, really enough to take the impact when you're diving off the boards, but you don't want to. The reason why you won't see any divers being like huge and bulky is because you don't want that. You want to have as much flexibility. Obviously, the more muscle and like weight you have on you, you have less of that. So yeah, you kind of just want to have really good core strength, good leg strength, because that's where all your jumps come from, and then just enough kind of core strength and upper body strength to brace for that impact when you hit the water. Because when you dive with the 10 meter, you hit the water at 30 miles an hour, so it's quite a hard impact on the body. So yeah, you don't want a lot of like muscle and weight around your upper body, because if you haven't got that full range when you're hitting, you're just going to collapse. And tricep issues are just absolutely rampant in 10 meter divers, where like I'd say like 85% of divers, maybe even 90 plus, have had tricep issues, because
they can't hold the position.
Yeah, because basically you go in the water. Most people think when you're diving, you're going like this, and it's like if you went in like that off a 10 meter board, you're done. You probably get a concussion. So like most people don't realise you actually grab your hand and you want to create like a flatter surface as possible when you hit the water. And people are like, oh, so what creates that like bubble or like the lack of splash when you go in is that when you hit the water like this gap, when you kind of like the water, this like water gets sucked into this hole that's above your head, and it acts as like a vacuum, and then that sucks in the water, which creates no splash. So it's kind of weird. People like don't really know how that is actually created, but this hole above your head creates a vacuum, and the water gets sucked into it. So it's weird because like people think you just dive in like that, and then it's just how small you are and how skinny you are creates the little splash. But that's kind of what allows you when you're hitting the water at like 30 miles an hour and you're going off that 10 meter board. That allows you to basically keep strong and keep that splash down. So yeah, it's a bit
I didn't know that.
Yeah, not a lot. Like I guess it's one of those things where if you're not in it, you don't know. But it's. So
does it work if you've got much longer arms? Does that have much of an impact? Or?
Yeah, what's good about diving is it's like jiu-jitsu where it doesn't really discriminate that much. Like I've got short arms, small wrists, small hands, like, and people say that like having big hands to get that big surface area, having big arms is good, but as long as you do like the fundamentals and you get like the mechanics right, it doesn't discriminate, and it basically just, if you do the right things, you are going to get the right result, which is quite nice. But there's certain aspects that are better. Like Tom, who I did synchro with, like Tom Daly, who I did synchro with in 2016. He's got massive hands, and people say that helps him when he like goes through the water, but I don't think it. I think it's similar to jiu-jitsu where it doesn't discriminate. You know what I mean? So which is really nice, because it means that if you're coming in, you're doing the right things, you're going to get the right results, really.
I think there's a lot of parallels to jiu-jitsu, right? Around the physicality and the way you're made up. You do need a good core strength for jiu-jitsu. The legs are underutilised in jiu-jitsu at the lower end of the experience level, but the more experienced you become, the higher level you become, you need to use your legs a lot more. We spoke today about that side mount position and driving off the toes. That is like a leg press, really. And you don't need a lot of upper body strength, really, do you? You need to be able to frame, you need to be able to, and that's a straight arm to a degree, or a bent arm. And obviously you need grips and stuff like that, but it's very, very similar. The one thing I noticed when you came in here, and I'd kind of joked and said to you, you've done this before. I didn't know you were at the time, by the way, because my wife told me, she said, oh, you've got a guy coming in. He said he's done a bit of diving, but he more played football, like Olympic. So he's super modest as well. But your ability to move was obviously very, very good, and your proprioception, which obviously makes sense now, because diving, you need to be aware of where you are in space. But I was convinced you'd done this before. I think there are a lot of parallels between the two sports. How have you found transitioning into jiu-jitsu being a sport as a diver?
Yeah, it's weird coming into an environment where it's it was really intimidating for me to come in.
It's incredible.
Yeah, which is like, people think, oh well, you've had, you've gone to the Olympics, you've had 20 years experience of a different sport, but it's weird when I came in here, it was, I've reset basically. I come in with, exactly the same as everyone else. So it was actually really intimidating for me to come in and like kind of experience a session for the first time. But it's one of the things where you come in and then it's like, as soon as you get the first session done, you're like, okay, it's a great group of people, they're really inviting. And it was just, it's a similar to like dynamic to what I've kind of been experiencing in the last 20 years. You come in here, you train with a group of people, you have a coach where you're doing kind of movements, you're getting feedback, and then you're just trying to make them better. And it's repetition, right? So it's like diving. I can't even tell you how many dives we end up doing, a year, let alone for the last 20 years. So it's just the same. You're using your body to make decisions and movements, and then you're getting feedback from someone, you're getting feedback from yourself as well. And then you're trying to make corrections and come in every day and make it better. So it's like, it kind of just feels like I'm back training again, which is nice, because that's just all I know. But yeah, it's very, very, very similar. I guess the only side I haven't really kind of come across yet is the competition side. But obviously, that there's plenty of time for that. But there's just, all sport at a fundamental and foundation level is the same, I feel like, especially team sports. It's a little bit different when you have like, I don't know, maybe tennis players who just train on their own, and it's like, but even though diving is done by yourself mostly, it's still a team environment, it's a team sport. So there's just so much similarities, and especially with the actual specifics of the sport, it's movement based. Yeah. And it's just about that feedback. So, and it's how you move your body. Obviously there's strength that comes into it, but at a foundation level, there's a lot of similarities, and that's probably why I was so interested to start it, even when I was diving, but obviously I couldn't, because I would have got shouted at.
Was it difficult for you on a mental level to go from obviously being at a really high level of something to being a beginner at something again?
Yeah, it's weird, because like people would think, oh, is it quite hard to be at a certain level and then come into a new sport and be bad at it? But because of the way that diving was I was kind of in that position every day. Like even towards the end of my career, I still come in every day and I'm still learning, and like it's what I'm used to, coming in not being good at something, trying to work on it and be better at it. So yeah, I think when you reach a certain level of sport, you have to have that level of kind of like humility of like, and kind of self-realization of, I'm not good at something, I'm going to get better at it. But it's not having that ego, I guess, with it. So it wasn't really that hard for me to come in and just try and do a new sport as such, because I'm just so used to doing it every day at training. Like even at the top level, sport humbles you every single day. So because I'm used to getting humbled every single day for the last 20 years, for me to come in here and just take a beating it wasn't any different really.
It's a growth mindset thing, isn't it? I mean, the people who don't stick jiu-jitsu are the ones who perhaps can't allow their ego to disappear. Which says it above there, like you can't have any egos. And basically what we're trying to say is you've got to have a growth mindset. You've got to accept that you're not going to be good and find a way to be better. And I think no matter what you turn your hand to in life, if you've got that mindset that you accept that there's always an opportunity for you to be a little bit better next time, you can turn your hand to pretty much anything.
Yeah. I think it is just, I said it to the kids as well when I came in and did a talk with them, like, you feel like sometimes you're not making any new progress, and you come in, maybe you're not good at something, but it's like you will have way more bad days than you will have good days. And it's, people they think, nah, no way, like the people at the top of sport, they're going to come in and just be great every day. Look at them, they just turn up to competitions. Like, trust me, even at the very top level, like they're getting humbled every day in training, and they're going through probably more bad days than there are good days. It's trying to be about turning up and trying to be as best as you can, really. And yeah, I
guess is that saying, if you're like the best in the room, the smartest in the room, you're in the wrong room kind of thing. It's like if you're always winning, and then it's like you're either that, literally you are the best in the world, or you're in the wrong room basically.
Yeah. The challenge we've got, I wrote about it today actually. It's interesting we're talking about this. So I'm writing another book. I'm trying to get my first book through the MOD. They won't sign it off, as you know, but I'm writing another book. And I'm 27,000 words into it. And today I was talking about this idea of building this wall of evidence of your ability to do hard things. And I referenced a talk I was at last week with Al Barrett, who founded Grenade, the protein bars.
Yeah.
He is friends with Richard Branson. Branson sent his private plane to pick up Al Barrett somewhere in the world and fly him to Necker Island to hang out on the island, right? And people see Al Barrett, he just sold Grenade for 200 million quid to Cadbury. And they see this guy flying out on this private jet to Necker Island and they think, I want that. What they don't see is the 15 to 20 years, and it's interesting you said 20 years because a friend of mine thinks it comes in 20 years, blocks, where he was an underqualified, low-paid PT in a crap gym, going around trying to sell supplements and distribute them to build up this knowledge and idea to be able to launch a brand, and then struggling through that. And I think the challenge our kids have got, Gen Z and Gen Alpha, who've grown up all around social media, is they're presented with these polished versions of people and success stories every minute of every day. Yeah. And it's like, well, I want to be that. They just don't see the hard work. They don't see the 8-year-old kid. They don't see you missing out on those selections. They just want the gold medal. And that's quite hard, isn't it? And I think, again, that's hopefully what we're doing here for the parents listening and the kids. We're giving them a chance to fail in a safe environment so they can learn that ability to bounce back.
I've been guilty of it as an athlete as well. Because when you're a kid and you see someone like I remember I went to my first competition. I came dead last, and I was probably bad at diving for the first 6 years I did it. I was terrible. To be honest, I said to my mum, I was like, "Why'd you keep taking me?" I was like, "Why are you wasting your money on petrol driving me up and down the country? I'm doing awful here." But again, it's just one of those things that people don't like. I used to get frustrated because I used to see kids that were really good when I was younger, and I used to be like, "They're just good." I was like, they're just good. Or even as an adult, I was like, that person's just so good at that. It's not fair, you know what I mean? But then I slowly realised they're that good for a reason. Their work, it's annoying because you almost feel like, why can't I be like that? But then even as a senior athlete, I used to see people that are just like, they're just good at that. It's like, and then the more you realise is actually they're just training every day. They're just training harder than you. The likelihood that someone's better than you just by chance is very small. If someone's better than you, they probably train harder than you. There's very few people that just kind of get to the best level and a top just by chance. I'd say it's just 0.1% of people, but the chance is if someone's better than you, they've worked harder than you. In my experience through sport, but as a kid, that was so frustrating for me because I used to see kids that were just talented and then be like, oh, it's just not fair. But yeah, now at the very, very top level, especially, it's just if they're better than you, they're probably just working behind the scenes harder than you. And I think that's why in training, my kind of mentality was I have to try and work harder than everyone in training so that when you step on that board and it comes to the competition, you have the best chance of performing, basically.
Nice.
I think that's probably just a good life lesson throughout everything, isn't it? It's, we probably overestimate the amount of effort we put into something. I know especially content stuff, let's say I put in a few hours into this podcast, there's probably a much more successful podcast. I'm thinking, look, I'm putting 5 hours into this podcast. There's not much more people can do. And there'll be people who are literally putting 50 hours into a 1 hour, 2 hour podcast.
Yeah, and the chances are that those podcasts that end up being successful as well, they will have had probably 100, 200, 300 episodes when no one tuned in.
Yeah.
And it's eventually people may be like, oh yeah, this is a great podcast, gets millions of views, and people are like, oh well, I don't want to start that. I'll start my podcast because it's just going to get no views. But a lot of people, when they're streaming as well on different websites, even social media for uploading views and say they want to start their own PT company or something like that, and they're uploading videos and it's getting not a lot of likes and stuff like that. You don't know how many times they've actually posted and put the work in where it's not shown. Yeah. It just might be that the 100th time they've done a podcast or the 100th video they posted, suddenly then it starts to gain some kind of traction. So it's basically that.
Talked a little bit about setbacks and stuff like that, but I think, and some parallels to jiu-jitsu, I think one thing that is or can be different in jiu-jitsu to diving, I know extremely little about diving.
It's right. The older I get, I feel the little I know about it. It's crazy.
With diving, I guess, jiu-jitsu, you can, in a 10-minute match, you can probably make a mistake or two. Until you get to the very highest level where might get punished. But even still, there will be a submission escape you can probably try and do. Yeah. In diving, it seems like you're you live and die in maybe like 2 seconds you're in the air it's like...
Yeah, this is one of my pet hates about diving. It's really hard for someone to understand. Like, the Olympics come around every 4 years, right? And it's like, what people don't understand, if you run that Olympic final 10 times over, just in the 10 days, you'd get a different result every time. And it's like, the thing about diving is it's all about trying to put yourself in the best position to perform on that day. But sometimes it's really hard to explain to people who watch the sport like why you didn't do well, but the margin for error is sometimes so small that almost sometimes you can't prevent it. Because in diving, you're in the air for about, I think it's 2.5 to 3 seconds per dive. And you do 6 dives in a list. So you're training your whole life pretty much for 15 to 18 seconds in the air. And the issue is at Olympic level in diving, if you make a mistake, there is no chance of you doing well. Obviously, when you like play a game of football, for example, that you can make 10 mistakes, but if you score a goal, you're a hero. Mm-hmm. But in diving at that level, especially at the Olympics, you can't make a mistake, otherwise your medal's gone. So it's really sad when I see some people who are some of the best divers I know have never won an Olympic gold medal. They've been the best every single day, every single year up to that point, but on that one day, in that 1 hour and a half slot for their competition, they maybe made one mistake, which is normal in diving. You make mistakes every single day. They've made one mistake and their Olympic dream is essentially over. So it's really hard to come to terms with sometimes the fact that you can be the best, but on the day, if you don't turn up and you don't execute, it's done.
So how much does luck play a part then? Or are you basically training then to mitigate or minimise or maximise, should I say, the amount of luck you've got on that day?
Yeah, I'd say diving is basically trying to it's trying to put yourself in the best position possible on the day. Like the Chinese are the best athletes. They are the best, and that's because they put themselves into the best situation they can going into that competition. But they make mistakes. Like they drop, if it was the best athletes winning all the medals, the Chinese would win all of them, all the time. But they slip up. And it's usually when the pressure's on that you start to see and it's almost the pressure of them knowing they're the best, that when the day sometimes comes round to it, they're like, oh my God, what happens if this is the day that I don't perform? So I'd say the best athletes and the top level guys will end up walking away with the medals. But again, it's one of them sports where the margin for error is so small that sometimes people can slip up and the best athletes sometimes don't win the medals. Yeah. So, but it's not as consistent, as I said, as some sports are. Like a running race, if you do the 100 metres, you roughly know who's going to be in the maybe top 8. With diving, you never know. Like this Olympics that's just gone by, and every other Olympics that I've watched, there's been medal favourites that have just gone out of the prelims, not even made it through to the top 18, which it's crazy because the Olympics that I was at in 2016, the current reigning Olympic champion didn't even make the final, which is top 12. Which is like when you put it like that in diving, it's because it was an outdoor pool. There was adverse weather conditions, and he just didn't adapt well to it. And sometimes it's like, when the margin for error is that small, in a sport like diving, it's just like you can't make a mistake. And that's one of the things I would found it really frustrating, because sometimes I train, I know I was the best, but then I turn up and I wouldn't execute and I wouldn't deliver. And it's frustrating when someone beats you and you know they're better than you. And at the end of the day, in diving, you're not competing against someone else really, you're competing against yourself. And I guess it's similar to jiu-jitsu, but I guess jiu-jitsu, you have a direct opponent, but in diving, as soon as you start to think about it like that, it's just, you have to concentrate on yourself. But yeah, so that's one of the things that was one of my frustrations when I was competing diving, is knowing that the margin for error is small. It's so small and you can't make mistakes, basically.
When you got such a high pressure environment and the margin for error is so small, mm-hmm. How did you end up dealing with those kind of pressures?
Well, sometimes, a lot of the time I didn't, and I struggled with it for years. And then I started working with basically a psychologist, and one of the big things that helped me when it came to competition practice was kind of just, I used to struggle with anxiety, and I used to think, leading into a competition, I used to be like, oh my God, there's a massive crowd, what happens if I don't do well? What happens if I don't execute this as well? Like, and then as soon as you start to feel like that, you start to almost tense up and shell up.
Yeah.
And you're never going to be able to perform well like that. And a big thing for me was trying. I read this book. It's actually worth reading, no matter what kind of what level you're at in any sport. It's called The Confidence Gap, and it was basically just ways of disassociating basically those negative thoughts that you have from your mind, so that you're not thinking about it all the time. Because that's what those worries are. They're just rumination of thoughts of bad things happening. You know what I mean? So I read this book called The Confidence Gap, and it kind of changed my whole perspective on how I saw competing. And then I could go into competitions where I was almost tricking my brain to not think about those bad things. And then I could go into a competition with a clear mind, focus on the things and the actual process of what I need to do well. And as soon as I could do that, it was, night and day, the results of my competition. The competitions where I was thinking that, like, I was lying in bed the night before going, oh my God, like, I've got world championships tomorrow. I'm not feeling prepared. Like, what happens if I fail this dive in front of thousands of people? Like, what happens if I do that? As soon as you have those thoughts, you tense up, you worry, and it's a recipe for disaster, really. So I think being able to have some mental exercises that kind of can help you focus on the good things and being present, because being present was, the key and the end goal really of those thoughts. Because having good thoughts is also as bad as, in my opinion, as having bad thoughts in competition. So being present and just focusing on the process of basically what I needed to do to make it good. Well, not good, but the correct thing was important. And I think just reading some books like that and having some help from my psychologist really helped me shift my perspective on competing.
Did you visualise at all?
Yeah, massive on visualisation, because it's a preference thing, really. It's funny because Tom, who I did synchro with in 2016, he does this thing where you'll see him, not anymore because he's retired, but when he was competing, he used to get his chamois, which is the little towel we have. He used to, when he's on the 7 metre board before he goes up to the 10 metre competition, he closes his eyes, puts the chamois around his head, and you see him moving his head and like visualising what he's doing before he's going to do it. And I think me and him especially were huge into visualisation, because when you stand on that board and then suddenly, because it's so quick, if you're suddenly in the air, you're like, oh my God, like, you need to almost prep yourself for that. And a lot of it is spatial awareness and stuff. So visualization was, sometimes I just find myself at home just visualizing my dives, which is like, that's just natural. But like, it was such a big part of preparation for competition, but also just training as well.
When you're up there on the board and just before you do your dive, does it become a mindless state? Like, are you just in a full flow state, or are you thinking through like every little movement? Like,
yeah, I'd say that when you're competing at your best, it's almost like, the horses at, the start of a race, when they have the like kind of like everything is just tunnel vision. That's what you feel like. And when I'm competing, and when I've been in that kind of, I guess, flow state, and it's that perfect balance of not having too much adrenaline, because you don't want all that, it's not like some sports maybe where you want to be really pumped up and psyched. Like, you don't want that, because you're going to end up, over using your energy in something, but you also don't want to be like all tense and shelled up and reserved. So it's like almost that flow state balance of like in the middle where you're feeling confident, you've got that energy, but you're putting it in the right areas. And it's funny because like when I competed at the Olympic Games, I kind of felt like that, where you could have told me there was one person in the crowd or 5,000 and I wouldn't have been able to tell you.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, and it's like it's almost that flow state where you just kind of block everything out. Sometimes it's hard because then you're very tunnel visioned in what you do. But in terms of competing, that's when I perform the best. We had the 2022 Commonwealth Games in Birmingham where I came away with individual gold. It was the biggest crowd I think I've ever performed, home crowd in front of, and the noise was just deafening. And like for a lot of people, it's really intimidating. And you hear the sound of the crowd, and you almost get like goosebumps, and like you don't want to feel overwhelmed and like have that kind of feeling on the board. And honestly, it's weird because there could have been no one in the crowd, or a million people in the crowd that day. When you're in that kind of state of mind, in that flow state, it's almost like you block out everything else.
Wow.
And sometimes you almost feel like you don't have to think because it's just natural.
And when does that end? The moment you hit the water?
As soon as the competition's done, really.
So you're in that state the whole way through.
Yeah.
You're just kind of in the zone and you're doing it.
Yeah, it's tough because the competition lasts about an hour and 15 minutes, an hour and a half. So it's really hard. It takes a lot of mental energy to be in that state for the whole time. But I feel like you have to, because it's one thing that I know Tom struggled with when I was doing synchro early on, because there was so much attention around him. He said he used to find himself looking in the balcony, you know, people coming in, people walking in, and like attention, like cameras, like he used to always find his like kind of mind wandering. And it's one thing that he said that he got a lot better at is towards the end of his career, when he started performing really well, was kind of basically not allowing yourself to get distracted. Because it's when, say you've done a dive or two in the competition, you're doing really well, suddenly you're chilling in the shower, the hot tub, you look in the balcony, you see your mum, and it's like, oh right, you know what I mean? Like it's almost like you don't want those distractions, or you look up and you see the scoreboard, you see you're in first place by about 40 points, and there's still 4 dives to go. Sometimes you're like, okay. So it's almost like sometimes you don't want those little distractions and things when you complete and when you're in that state. And the best thing, I think, is just to block out those distractions.
Nice. And there's a discipline to that too, right? Is that something you learn then over time, do you think?
Yeah, it took me a long time to learn. And like, it's very easy to say if a kid's got a jiu-jitsu competition, or even an adult's got it's very easy for them to say, don't get distracted. Like, don't look in the balcony when your mum's waving at you or something like that. Like, it's very hard to tell that to a kid or even to an adult, like, don't do that. And I spent a lot of competitions and time doing that, and it's just something you just learn how to get better at. And it's, again, just every time, for me, it was just every time I was doing it, acknowledging that, like, okay, I'm getting distracted because I feel this way, I feel anxious or I feel worried. I've acknowledged that I feel that way, and then it's just about saying, okay, I've acknowledged it, it's fine, put that thought to the side and then carry on. And then the more I just kind of had more acknowledgement for those things and being like, yeah, it's normal to feel like this, it's normal to get distracted, it's normal to feel anxious and nervous going into a competition. I think it's the worst was when I was like, I'm nervous, but I shouldn't feel that way.
Yeah.
But it's completely normal. Like, you think these top level athletes at the Olympics and, you know, other events are going into those events with no nerves, you're crazy. Like, but it's the difference is they go, I'm nervous, but this is normal. This is like my preparation this is my body telling me it's getting ready. And I think the more I was like, I'm nervous, I'm worried, but that's okay and it's normal, that's when I kind of had a shift. It's when I was like, oh, I'm nervous, but I shouldn't be, or I'm worried about this, but I shouldn't be. It's like, as soon as you have a bit of acknowledgement and acceptance of that and being like, yeah, it's completely normal to feel nervous, that's when I kind of noticed a positive shift in how I felt.
I think that's a wonderful lesson for anyone listening or watching this, actually. Regardless of age, it's about that reframing of those thoughts and emotions. We're always going to have them. It's part of life, and no matter what you do, whether you're at Olympic level or you're not, you're going to feel a certain way, and just accepting those feelings, isn't it? And then reframing them in a positive way. I think that's a really good way to kind of finish. Can I ask before we go, what's the future for you? We've spoken offline a little bit about this. You've got some options. Mm-hmm. Where do you want to be? What do you want to be doing?
You know what? It's nice to have a bit of time now, because it feels like my life has been non-stop for the last 20 years. So I've taken a little bit of time to kind of work out what I really want and what I really want to do. So I'd like to stay in sport, because sport's my passion. I love it. I love everything that it brings, like the whole community here. I'd love to carry on doing jiu-jitsu. We'll see where I am. But yeah, I think it's just taking that time to realise what I want and what I want to kind of put all my energy into and work towards. So could be doing a bit of coaching down the line in diving, or I guess we'll just see how we go. But I mean, outside of that, I kind of want to keep up other sports that I've not been able to try for the last however many years. So I'm playing my football again a lot. I'm doing jiu-jitsu, and hopefully I don't get injured. So.
Good man.
Awesome. Till next time, guys.